Tier list time. Today I'm making a tier list about all the new Temporal Forces decks and where I think they'll rank in terms of overall meta competitive viability. Shout out to ptcg for the tier list, and let's just get into it. I don't think Dialga is going to be that good. It does gain the new Metang, so it has some theoretically more consistent energy acceleration than it had previously. I still don't think that's good enough. Anti-Valiance loses a ton of switches to rotation. Yeah, and it already was kind of a fringe deck before. RC's Giratina, I think, has a serious shot at being the best deck in format when everything's said and done. Just super consistent, can be super disruptive with Airy, with Grabber, and it has really good bulk and damage outputs. Great Tusk is a really tough one to rank. Mill decks have a pretty bad reputation, but this one is a little different. I'm gonna be conservative and put it in B tier. This deck could end up being better than this. It could be worse than this. But having a really bulky Pokemon milling every single turn is pretty good. Having my ancient support every turn does kind of suck, but I do think that this deck will be pretty solid. I am definitely low on future. I mean, it's an Iron Hands deck. It takes extra prize cards. How bad can it be? I think if I'm putting Tusk in B tier, I think it's probably appropriate to put Future Box in here. I'm talking about the Iron Crown, Iron Hands deck from the top 16 of the Champions League. I don't think like a toolbox style deck with Iron Leaves and stuff will end up being that great. But yeah, I think it'll be okay. Iron Hands going fast, going burst seems pretty good. Regular Lost Box, like with Roaring Moon, with Iron Hands, maybe Rain Charizard, also seems like it could be pretty good. Is it better than these two? Probably. Is it A tier? I think Lost Box can put everything together and it being a tier deck. Got all kinds of tools to work with. Why not, right? Definitely A based on potential, right? Giratina, however, takes a big fall from, like, we're doing this tier list from last format. It's an S tier, but the loss of Path to the Peak is pretty substantial, and Battle VIP Pass is not. Buddy Poffin is not the same as Battle VIP Pass in this deck, so I think Giratina is. I think it probably belongs in. I don't think it like is totally dead, but I'm not sure it's all that great anymore either. It's kind of unproven, sort of like Future and Great Tusk. I mean, all these decks are. It just doesn't feel like very super well established, or a deck that has the chance to be like in the conversation's best second format, where I feel like Arctina or Lost Box could be. Gardevoir takes a big hit with rotation, loses a ton of consistency. I don't think either build of Gardevoir will. Well, I think the Gardevoir Raging Bolt deck has a chance, but it probably isn't as good of a chance as Dialga does, honestly. All right, now to the Charizard decks. These are really good. I think I'm sure I have both these in S tier. I haven't, like, honestly, like, we were hyping up Bibzard in Paradox Rift formats, and turns out Pidgeysard was better, and Bibzard's getting a ton of hype again. Is Pidgeysard just still better? I think there actually is serious merit that Bibzard is the more consistent deck. Probably better in a Charizard mirror match. They both seem really good. Both seemingly have the best second format title already given to them, so not gonna knock it. We'll put them in S. Chin Pao pretty much loses nothing to rotation, gains Buddy Poffin, Cryptomaniac, Prime Catcher, so it's definitely a tier deck. I don't think it's quite as good as Charizard, but it's definitely in the conversation as one of the best decks in formats. Raging Bolt, definitely, yeah, it can go in C tier. I think it has potential to be like an okay, solid deck and format, but probably not anything ultra spectacular. So then after that we have Roaring Moon, and Roaring Moon hasn't been doing that great in Japan. I think like a lot of mist energy in these RCs and Charizard decks is not very helpful, and some single price stuff. I think Roaring Moon we'll put it in B tier. It doesn't seem incredible, but it's still an honest, fast deck. I don't know why it would be super bad all of a sudden. I think a Golden Palkia A tier deck, doesn't really lose too much to rotation, like gets the Buddy Boffin Prime Catcher, similar to a Chin Pao, honestly, except it might actually have a better Charizard matchup or better Arceus matchup. Now with Maximum Belt, these decks like Charizard, Arceus can more aggressively knock out Chin Paos early, where they can't necessarily do that against Goldengo, so I think the deck is pretty good. It might be better than Chin Pao, still not sure yet, it's probably less consistent. I think Snorlax Stall has a legitimate claim to being the best deck in format. It has some sketchy matchups, namely Lugia or Arc. So I think it's an A tier for now because the decks that it loses to are pretty bad losses. But it's also just like a counter meta deck. So like once we really see what the meta turns out to be, there's room for innovation, improvement to maybe make Snorlax more tailored towards the meta that we end up seeing. But having a pretty much auto win into the best decks in format seems pretty good. The Baby Asian Box deck is really unique. You have single prize attackers that can do pretty high amounts of damage early in the game, but also have an annoying amount of HP for other single prize decks. So I think the Baby Asian Box deck, A tier might be a little high, but we're just gonna do it. I think it's either like A tier, top of B tier. It's been doing solid in Japan, and I think that, yeah, it's just a pretty solid single prize deck. It's not like one-shotting too much too often, but when it does reach those one-hit numbers by the late game, pretty good. Kind of like Reggie's. Like, it's sort of a higher maintenance deck, but it does sort of beat up on the other single prizers and has some interesting tools to deal with. Now, Lugia, I think, is an S tier deck. This is not just like biased because it just won the Champions League. I feel like if you think about it, Lugia doesn't really take bad matchups this format, or not that many, and it's deceptively consistent with the Call for Family Minccino. Burnett's not too big of a loss. It just like plays like a single prize deck for most of the game, like after it gets its summoning stars, but does have that multi-prize beat stick in Lugia. So I think that this deck is very real and very good. That there's like not a lot that's just inherently favored into this deck. Like Charizard also already like putting Delphox in there to try to snipe some Mincinos. I think Miraidon has a better chance of being viable than these four at the very bottom, but I think it's probably similar bucket to Raging Bolt. Bennett, like the new Salvador support is really cool to get the turn 1 item lock. It's just still not that impressive amount of damage. How you're going to be really negatively impacting their game plan with item lock, and some decks just don't really care that much. So I'll put Bennett in C because it has potential. I'm sure Matus is going to cook up something with it eventually, but overall I don't think it's going to be that great. And Torterra, yeah, Torterra ain't it. So you might be noticing that like Arceus Vulpix is missing from this list, and I think it would probably be in the B or A tier. It is kind of a meta call deck where like if these Charizard decks are not playing like Gouging Fire or some sort of tech card, like if the meta is perfectly prepared for Delpha or for Vulpix, the card sucks and you might as well be playing by any other Arceus deck. But for the Champions League, most of the Charizard decks were not prepared for it. Most of the meta was not prepared for it, so it did really well. I don't foresee that happening initially in our Temporal Forces format, but there could eventually be a point where Vulpix becomes a pretty solid wall again. I think that's everything. There's like other arc piles that I'm sure you could put in there. Probably be in the B or A tier. Yeah, I think that's everything. That's what I think the Temporal Forces meta will end up looking like. If you disagree with anything, let me know. If you hate the list, just rock the heck out of the dislike button. I don't care. If you like the list, hit the like button. That's pretty cool. I did say Raging Bolt had some potential, so if you want to see what I'm talking about, check out this video right here where I talk about a spicy Raging Bolt list that I've cooked up that I think has some potential to be pretty good in this next meta.